Meeting of the Pinellas County Charter Review Commission to order. My name is Brian Ongst. I serve as the chairman. I was appointed by Commissioner Latvala, and we'll start with introductions to my right.
Hi, I'm Dr. Lindsay Grove. I am the vice chair and public at large citizen appointee.
Good evening, Senator Nick DeSegli, Pinellas Legislative Delegation appointee.
Good evening. My name is Dave Eggers. I'm the County Commission appointee.
Terry Lipsy Scott, Commissioner Flowers appointee.
Ashley Overrun, Commissioner Brian Scott appointee.
Jim Milliken, Commissioner Peters appointee.
Doug Thomas, facilitator.
Alan Swartz, I'm replacing Ricky Butler as Commissioner Peters appointee. Actually, I'm a at-large citizen appointee, I believe. Oh, I'm Commissioner. Okay, good. That's me.
So which one is it? I'm sorry. Who's?
Jim is the at-large appointee, and Alan is
Okay, all right.
Good evening, Rob Posovic. I'm Commissioner Eggers appointee.
Hello, I'm Tom Stack. I'm Charlie Justice appointee.
Good evening, Mark Strickland, Commissioner Long appointee.
Evening, Mike Twitty, Constitutional Officers appointee.
Thank you. Mr. Vos, do you want to introduce yourself?
Please. Wade Vos, General Counsel to the CRC.
All right, very good. Before we get started into the agenda, we will introduce our new members publicly. So as I explained to the members just prior to the meeting starting, there is a prohibition on elected officials from serving as either a county commissioner appointee or a citizen at large appointee of the county commission of the Charter Review Commission. And two of our members, Ricky Butler, who was Commissioner Peters' appointee, was elected to the Pinellas Park City Council. And Todd Jennings, who was an at-large appointee of the County Commission, was elected to the Town of Bel Air Council. And so the County Commission last Tuesday appointed Mr. Alan Schwartz to represent the seat of Commissioner Peters and Division Chief Jim Milliken to represent the at-large seat that was previously filled by Mr. Jennings. So Mr. Schwartz, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, that would be great.
Hi, my name's Alan Swartz. I've lived in Pinellas County for almost 55 years. Went to middle school, high school here. Went to the University of Florida got a degree in accounting. I'm a certified public accountant and done previously I served twice on the Charter Review Commission that the City of Pinellas Park had. Once in 1999, once in 2019, I chaired the 2019 commission. Other community things I do is for 12 years I was commissioner of the Pinellas County Housing Authority, and I am currently the chairman of the Board of Trustees of the City of Pinellas Park's General Employees Pension Fund, which I've chaired for the last 28 years, been a trustee for 30 years. So
very good. Commissioner Schwartz, welcome. Thank you. And Chief Milliken, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Sure. Jim Milliken, Division Chief Fire Marshal for Lelman Fire District. I've been with them 33 years. I've born and raised here in St. Petersburg, so I'm a native. Probably pretty few and far between, but that's okay. So I served all my time here in school through UF and some other schools, and I serve on the Juvenile Welfare Board. I've been with them since 2017. I've sit on the Mid-County Council Board, and I've sit on numerous local committees.
Thank you both and welcome. And just for your benefit, so the way we've approached our work is that we tried to identify topics of interest at the beginning and then approach those topics holistically, trying to get some consensus so that Mr. Vos and Mr. Thomas could distill those issues into draft ballot language. But we have not taken any final votes on ballot language. We're going to do that all at once at the end. So you haven't missed anything in terms of voting on any of the referenda that may be proposed. But of course, we have had a lot of discussion so far. And the two areas that we're continuing to focus on over the coming weeks will be term limits and whether or not to propose some kind of executive elected official. And I know we'll be joined tonight by County Administrator Barry Burton to discuss that. So at this point, I will go ahead and ask for any public comment for any items that are not on today's agenda. And we do have one, Mr. Ballard Geddes. Mr. Geddes, you will have 3 minutes.
Hi, good evening. David Ballard Geddes Jr. I live on Georgia Avenue in Palm Harbor. Pinellas County Home Rule Charter, Section 2.04Q, recognizes a transfer of county function and power in an attempt at taking political powers away from the public domain and privatizing political functions and power as transferred by the county. At the charter meeting on February 26, a board member suggested on changing the language of the charter using the word consolidation instead of the word transfer in an attempt to obscure such premeditated shape-shifting and usurpation in government endeavoring to consolidate, furthering to conceal the formulation of private, individual, political aggrandizements in such internal transfers of power. Once the county internally privatizes itself through such consolidated transfers, our current government, this government, in hindsight, will be viewed as a puppet form of government serving a banana republic, thus revealing the paradigm staged within the quartering of this government. Based on the Interlocal Cooperation Act of 1969 in Statute 163.01, Pinellas County Home Rule Charter is attempting to internally transfer the county public utility system into the hands of unelected privateers as a facility takeover in government. Such privateering is seen as being granted in Executive Order 12803 via Statute 15390, seen as granted in Section 6.03C of the Charter to aid and abet such privateering in such premeditated interlocal consolidation, transfer, and usurpation of government in the promulgation of despotic water jurisdictions formulated under the 14th Amendment, preconceived on a staged aggregate of the water supply. I do believe that we have a licentious scheme of legal meanderings taking place within our current structure of government regarding water jurisdictions therein. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Do we have any other members of the public who'd like to make a comment on items not on the agenda? I don't see anyone online. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to approval of the minutes from February 26th and from March 21st. Has everyone had an opportunity to review the minutes?
Move approval, Mr. Chair.
We have a motion from Mr. Twitty and a second from Ms. Lipsy Scott. All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. We have the privilege of being joined by our county administrator, Mr. Barry Burton. We have identified as a potential topic of interest whether or not to propose some form of an executive that is elected by the electorate to serve in what would essentially be a county mayor role, for lack of a better term. Prior to delving into that topic, and that's really the last substantive topic that we're introducing for the commission's consideration, we wanted to invite Mr. Burton to give us his perspective on the current system and how he manages the county government from the executive side, and give us the benefit of his insights, and also give you the benefit of being able to ask him some questions. Mr. Burton, we welcome you, and you have the floor, sir.
Thank you. So when Doug approached me about comment on this topic, I'm like, wow, how do I talk about a topic that, is really about my position? That puts me in a very awkward position. So I can tell you about my background, my experience, and what I do as part of the day-to-day operations. What I can't comment on are policies that our board hasn't expressed an opinion on, and that's part of our ethical guidelines and the way in which we conduct our business. So as having an elected board, they hire the county administrator, they hire the county attorney, and they set the policy direction for the day-to-day operations. They delegate to me to oversee those day-to-day operations. My background is that I've been, and you could have a variety. It happens to be, you're asking me, but my background is I have a master's degree in public administration. I began as a budget analyst, became a department head, became an assistant county administrator, and now I've been a county administrator for a little too long. But I gained that experience through experience, and so, what I bring is to be able to work with our departments, work with our constitutional officers, work with other appointing authorities, and give options and ideas to our board. And because I report to the entire board, I can express the ideas, and then I carry out the direction that they provide. And so they get to hear differing opinions. They get to hear different ideas. And then we respond to that, or we do additional research, and we bring back recommendations to them. So that is the current form that we have, very similar to a city manager, except in county government's a little bit more complex because you have constitutional officers, you have a variety of different types of boards and commissions and a weaving of things that make county government work. And so I'd be happy to answer questions. I'm not sure the line of questioning or things that I should present. I had expressed, to Doug that if you wanted an advocacy for something, that you should probably talk to our International City and County Managers Association. ICMA, I am a member. I'm a credentialed manager. We have certain ethical guidelines that we live by. We certify our managers, and we also remove that when they fall outside those ethical boundaries. And so if you wanted more information, I'm sure they could delegate a local person to be able to talk about that, either a retired manager or things like that, that could give you more. But I'd be happy to answer questions, but I'm limited in what I can say simply because I follow the direction of the policy directions of our board, and they haven't issued an opinion on this.
Understood. And thank you, sir, for being here. I appreciate it. So again, this is just the very beginning of this part of the conversation. You have been extremely responsive and supportive of us on a number of other very technical issues. So I appreciate that support and your staff support who have been here from the beginning. So certainly welcome your input as we go forward to the extent that you feel comfortable providing input as the discussion plays out over the coming weeks, which I would imagine there'd be at least probably 3 or 4 more meetings as we go through that issue. So at this time, does anyone have any specific questions for Mr. Burton? Understanding that he may not feel comfortable taking a position personally, but maybe about his role and how he sees his role in county government. Commissioner Lipsey-Scott.
Having witnessed a strong mayor form of government, in fact, a city manager form of government moved to a strong mayor form of government within the city of St. Petersburg. I guess my question is, how do you feel about the position that you currently hold becoming an elected position where there are absolutely no, there's nothing to suggest that the professional skill sets are in place in order to be an administrator?
I can't answer an opinion on that because that's a policy direction from the commission. It's not about me. It shouldn't be about me.
Understood.
The form of government you take is really about what our elected officials and our citizens want. I mean, when this first came up, I started counting. I'm like, okay, well, I'll have 8 years. I'll be vested. I'll be 62 when this would actually come into play. So I don't know that I really care, for me, right? But it's not about me. I mean, that's a point in time, and so it's the form that you want. That's the reason you're an appointed body and advisory to the commission about what works best for our community. So I can't answer that because that would be a personal opinion, and that's not appropriate for me to answer.
Okay. Other questions, Commissioner Eggers?
I'm just going to make a couple of comments. First of all, the way the county government was changed back in around the year 2000 was to create 3 at-large positions that were voted on by all residents, and 4 district commissioners that, if you cut horizontally across the county, we're kind of each have about 250,000 folks that we represent. So you have a cross-section of representation that are elected. Fortunately or unfortunately for the residents, they have to put up with us for 4 years, at least, and then maybe longer. One thing about hiring an outside person like Barry to come in and run the operation, number one, it's at will. So we can keep Barry around 6 months if he doesn't do a good job. We can keep him around 6 years, 10 years if he does a great job. And he brings the experience and objectivity to our county that we're immersed in being here and knowing what's going on, being a part of the political process, which frankly doesn't belong in the operation of the organization, in my opinion. We've been very lucky to have an experienced person bring that skill set. But more than that, I think, during the pandemic, I think unfairly, Barry was critiqued at different times for his role and how front page he was. But he was all of that because we granted him those authorities. Not only does he have that day-to-day authority, but during that pandemic and during the emergency crisis, it didn't make any sense for us to be meeting daily as a commission to make decisions that were required. And so when an emergency comes up, it's staff that takes over. We delegate those authorities, and I think that is a big difference. And again, Barry and I have had our differences. I always told Barry, I said, just be honest with me. You lied to me one time, you've lost me. We've disagreed on issues. We bumped heads last year on the budget. We'll probably bang heads again on some things, but he brings an objectivity that is really refreshing to have. And again, I'm talking specifically about Barry, but I'm also generalizing the comments about the position that he holds. And like I said, he can be here 8 years or he can be here a month if he's not doing his job. So I think that's a benefit that we have in operating this complex, very difficult job county that we have. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other questions for Mr. Burton? I'm looking more for questions as opposed to comments. We'll have plenty of time to discuss it, but more like questions is what I think we're doing right now. Yes, Mr. Popovich.
Yeah, thank you. If you were in our seat, where would you go to find the pros and cons of such a situation?
Fair question. I think you could, there's lots of different opinions, and they're formed in some basis of background and people's own experience. You can have a good mayor, and you can have a bad mayor. You can have a good manager. You can have a bad manager, right? And so people bring their experience to a seat like that, and that's the beauty of having a democracy where you can choose your own form of government, right, in my opinion. But I think ICMA would be a good way if you wanted to have that type of detailed debate. They can offer that. There's probably others. I mean, a couple of years ago, Clearwater went through a debate about whether or not to change their form of government. There may be, others that have opinions. That's where I would start. They can probably talk about those in greater detail. You could get a retired manager in and talk about just their own experience about strong mayors, this mayor, and we talk about strong mayor. You could have different forms off of that. There's, there's different ways of doing that. But I'm limited in what I can do because our board, and that's, to talk about my position, the beauty of the board is that we carry out the wishes of the entire commission. And it is the entire commission that hires me or fires me, not one individual. Okay, and so from that standpoint, that's the way the current structure is set up. But I would defer to ICMA or a retired manager, somebody that could have that type of discussion.
Other questions for Administrator Burton? Administrator Burton, just generally, under the current system, you have 7 bosses essentially, who are elected directly by the people. How do you manage disagreements between the commissioners and build consensus so that your staff and that you get the policy direction that you need? Understanding that there obviously are politics that are involved in electoral politics with the commissioners, and then how do you adjust if and when the commission changes?
That's a good question. I try to figure that out each day. All right, okay, and if you think about it, you know, we're all people, right? And so I come and I have recommendations, and commissioners have different ideas. What I try to provide is, from a staff perspective, the pros and cons to issues. A lot of times you hear things out in the community that doesn't necessarily have a fact pattern behind it, right? I think a lot of this did come out of the pandemic, okay? And there was a lot of misinformation out there. I've offered to groups, I said, if you want to come and debate about the decisions, Bob Galtieri and I would be happy to come, because we sat there every morning at 7:30 and every night at 6 o'clock trying to make decisions about things we had no idea was going to come our way. And you had to make decisions, you know? And so, you know, the beauty of this is we try to work with commissions. I try to work with our elected officials, okay? Because they all have constitutional responsibilities that are each different. With our board, I meet with them. We talk about things here, and we did this morning. And we had a work session about big issues, big topics, trying to get direction from the commission. Before that, though, I meet with them individually. I get their ideas, their thoughts, their concerns, information that they need to where they can get to where they can make a good decision. And that can be informed. They have to weigh whether it's the fact pattern that I've provided in background and detail, or whether it's what they're hearing in the community, who elects them. And they have to weigh, you know, what makes the right decision. Sometimes, you know, you say this is the right thing to do, even though, you know, the community may feel differently. But you're not hearing from the entire community anyway, right? You know, so they have to weigh that. But that's the beauty of having elected officials that then ultimately make that decision. And so I do push back. I try to advocate for making sure they have information. But ultimately, if the decision that they make, I'll carry it out as if it was my own idea, because that's my job, you know, and that is a democracy. So, you know, it's more of an art versus a science. You know, and we work on that each and every day. You work differently with different people, you know, because we all have our own personalities, and you try to navigate that. We certainly had a change a year and a half ago with elections. Well, the board changed. So I try to bring them together and facilitate a way in which they can operate positively for our community. But again, it's a recommendation. Ultimately, they make the decision on how that works or not.
Thank you, Administrator Burton. Are other questions for Administrator Burton at this time? Yes, Commissioner Twitty.
Barry, do you feel like it would weaken a county commissioner's role having an elected administrator?
Yeah, I think you have to weigh that. You know, you would, I mean, more personalities you put into something, and you know, that obviously adds to the complexity of it. And I think it's also based on people.
Thank you.
Any other questions at this time? Okay. Well, Administrator Burton, thank you so much. And like I said, this is not about you at all. We're very lucky to have you. We all appreciate you and the support that you and your staff have given us and the current commission, but specifically to this group, us, over the last few months. As you know, we're looking at how the county attorney is hired and fired. We're looking at issues regarding supervisor of elections, timing on referenda and citizen initiatives and those things. So we're taking, you know, a pretty holistic view of a 12-page document, which isn't a real thick document. So there's not a whole lot to look at. This is one of the things that we can look at. So I think there was enough interest to just open the topic for discussion, and we'll move forward with that discussion. And I think what I would propose to y'all, if you're okay, what I'm looking for is consensus going forward for Mr. Thomas and Mr. Vos, but like to probably invite someone from the ICMA or FCCMA, which is the Florida City and County Managers, and then probably a retired strong mayor, someone that has served in that role either in Tampa, St. Petersburg, Orange County, Miami-Dade, or Duval, to the extent that any of them are willing to come meet with us. But that would probably be a good way to get the two pros and cons. Obviously, there's pros and cons to everything. If there was one that was better than the other, then everybody would be doing it that way. So does that make sense for everybody? Okay. So Mr. Thomas and Mr. Vos, do you have what you need from us on this topic?
I think so, yes, thank you.
Thank you all for your service. You know, this is part of building that foundation, and what you're doing is important. So personally, I appreciate that and what you're trying to figure out, and, you know, set a good path forward for our county.
Thank you, sir. Thank you again for being here. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, before
Yes, Mr. Thomas.
Barry leaves, just to be aware, we've been working with Barry's staff after these meetings to update them in terms of what's taking place. I don't believe, but I guess one last shot, there's nothing came up through administrative review process of any other items that you felt that the Charter Review Commission should be reviewing as far as from an administrative standpoint that impacts your operations.
Yeah, they did ask, are there other, tweaks or enhancements that we would see from a staff standpoint? We didn't, so no further recommendations from us.
Okay, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Okay, so moving on now, we have some draft ballot language from the discussion that we had at our last meeting regarding term limits. And I will say that Attorney Vose, as expected, did a brilliant job distilling a topic that I probably made overly complicated into something that is very easy to read and understand. Essentially, the three issues: how many years of service, how many years, if any, would there be a sit-out period, and then when does it take effect? Does it affect current commissioners? If so, when does that start? Does it start going forward, or does it start sometime in the future? So, Attorney Vose, I'm specifically looking at Exhibit A. I found Exhibit A to be the most helpful. But Attorney Vose, do you want to take it from here?
Chairman, I think you just summarized most everything I was going to say. So, as you have in the memo before you, I put together this language, again, trying to strive to make sure the voters know what they're voting on, as always. And so, based on the discussion you had at your last meeting, broke it down into kind of the component options. As you see there in Exhibit A, it's composite draft language where you can just kind of mix and match whatever your end result might want to be. Had examples in Exhibits B and C so you can see clean language. Oftentimes you want to see precisely how it's going to look when it's on a ballot as opposed to having to think through those multiple options. And then in the memo I also included an Exhibit D. That Exhibit D went through an analysis with regard to, because you were talking about retrospective term limits as a possibility, I did go ahead and run through those hypothetical scenarios. Did that primarily, and I just want to mention this as a caution, I did it primarily so when you're talking about those dates in the past, wouldn't necessarily fixate on sitting and doing math and figuring out this and that or whatever, because from long experience, I can tell you that's where some folks, might end up spending their time. Wanted to have that there just as a resource to help you think through it. So primarily, you could focus on the policy and looking at where you might want to go with respect to term limits and the various numerical dynamics there. I'm glad to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Mr. Vose before we get into discussion? Okay. So at the last meeting, we took another kind of informal vote to say the majority of this commission was interested in moving forward with the term limit discussion. So I think we've settled that issue, that we are interested in proposing something on term limits. There are three key areas, and they obviously all relate in terms of what you finally propose. I would like to start, if we could, possibly and focus on when would you prefer this to take effect? Because I think settling that issue is important in terms of giving direction to move forward to a final product. I heard, kind of various discussions on that. And so if you look at the bottom of it's the bottom of the ballot language on Exhibit A, what Attorney Vose has proposed is some retrospective, it's like, when does the 12 years or 8 years start to count? Is it from 2018? Is it from 2020? Is it from 2022? Is it from this coming November? In other words, everybody starts fresh? Or would it take place sometime in the future where it doesn't even start yet? So I'm hoping that we can at least get consensus on that topic. Yes, Senator DeSegli.
I'll start. And thank you for this. This was very well done. I know we had a lot of ideas the last meeting. I'm gonna go ahead and say that after thinking about this and looking at these options, I prefer the effective date being the election day. So it gets us November 5th, 2024. I'm not supportive of this being retroactive, just simply because I don't want this to be a reflection on any of the current county commissioners. They They have been on the ballot with no term limits. And I just believe that I'm concerned with the potential confusion on for the ballot language if we have this retroactive to a certain extent. So moving forward, as far as an effective date, my preference would be November 5th, 2024.
Okay, thank you, sir. Other thoughts on that? Yes, Mr. Schwartz?
I would agree with Senator DeSigley. It's going to be voted on by the citizens in November. It starts November. I think that makes it a real clean cut right there.
Okay. Any other comments? Yes, Chief Milliken.
I also agree with the senator as well. I think we muddy the waters and we try to back the date up a little bit, and we start confusing the citizens about what we're trying to implement. A fresh start when the voters go to vote is really, in my opinion, the way to move forward.
Okay. Commissioner Steck.
Excuse me. I agree so far with everything that's been said. To have something like this be done retroactively just seems inappropriate. In other words, we've got a new philosophy, a new way of providing government for the people. That should start at a date in the future, a date certain. And the 24, 26, I have no problem with either one of them, but I'd be concerned about backdating it.
Okay. Anyone else? That's my preference as well. You know, I think that Commissioner Steck said it really well at the last meeting. It's, you know, this is a prohibition on the voters and on the candidates from being able to run at a certain point. And so it's unfair, in my opinion, to put that on voters that voted for folks that are on the commission now or commissioners that are serving now. So I think starting fresh and making it clear it would start as of that date that would start that clock, that's my preference as well. So again, this doesn't bind you to actually vote to put that on the ballot, but in terms of narrowing this down, are we good with telling Mr. Vose and Mr. Thomas to focus on the language would start November 5th, 2024 would be the date that term would start to count towards term limits? Yes, Commissioner Steck.
And thinking about this a little bit more, in order to have time for whatever decisions have to be made or whatever things have to be worked out, I would be more inclined to go with 2026 rather than starting it right immediately as of the day of the election.
Commissioner Overend.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would be worried about state preemption if we didn't start sooner than 2024. I think that's the conservative approach to, I mean, as we discussed last meeting, that's always a possibility, but I think that would be the conservative approach to try to avoid it the best we can, is put it in effect as soon as possible. So I would also prefer that they take effect in 2024. I would worry about 2026, another bill coming out of the legislature for county commissioner term limits, and then having the same language this year that said effectively, if you didn't have term limits in your county charter by July 1, 2024, then the bill through the legislature would have preempted your term limits.
Great point. Anyone else want to weigh in on this? Commissioner Eggers.
Yeah, I guess I'm going to go along with the group so far, then that from a simplicity standpoint. But really, if we're talking about term limits and we're talking about holding people to a smaller amount of years served, you have to at least consider the other extreme, the most conservative extreme, which is the 2018, which essentially, if you're looking at 12-year term limits, everybody there is getting 12 years at least. If you're looking at 8-year term limits, everybody's getting 8 years. You know, it is a different way of thinking. I understand that, and these commissioners, I think, would be just fine with whatever is decided. I do think, from the simplicity standpoint, that 2024 is the right number, a right year, and that's the only reason I'm going to support it. But I think we need to get people moving out sooner, frankly, and they don't need to be sitting in office longer than what the intent of this whole effort is. So, but anyway.
Thank you, sir. Other comments on when it starts? I'm hearing 2024. Okay. So, Mr. Vose and Mr. Thomas, is that clear on that regard?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, maybe the bigger ticket item. Number of years, 8 or 12. Again, we're not going to vote on a final tonight. We're trying to get ballot language to propose to you to vote on at the end of the process. But I'll open the floor on the 8 or 12 discussion. Yes, Chief Milliken.
My opinion, 12 years would be the proper place to go. It's 3 terms. 3 terms gives them time to see changes that happen in local government. Things take, progress takes a little time depending on the type of projects that you may be looking after when you start that process. And 12 years, I think, is a fair amount of time to get your agenda done, work on the projects that you maybe campaigned for at the time. So I would move for 12 years.
Okay. Yes, Commissioner
Sorry
Strickland.
to muddy the waters, Mr. Chair. So are we also taking into consideration the cooling off period of 2 years or 4 years?
I was going to do that
next.
at
Yeah.
the end, because my assumption is that how long the group wants to go on terms is going to impact how long the group wants to go on cooling off.
Correct. Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll get there.
I was going to do that last,
Sure.
yeah. Anybody else want to let us know where they're at right now? Yes, Senator DeSagley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've been clear. I support 8 years. Someone who is bound to term limits in the legislature, talking about a complex process in the Florida legislature, and taking 2 years to learn to find the bathroom. I fully respect and understand I think the position that it takes a while to learn the ins and outs of county government. It takes a period of time to learn how to be effective. And when I say learn how to be effective, being effective on behalf of your constituents, that is a really important thing. I want my county commissioners to be very effective. I want every individual that represents me in government to be effective. And so I understand the position of the 12 years. I support the 8 years because I think you look at federally, obviously, term limits for the President of the United States is 8 years. Here in the state of Florida, the governor is 8 years, the cabinet is 8 years, the Senate and the House, obviously in the legislature, is 8 years. And so it's more of a consistency thing for me personally. But I support the 8 years.
Okay. Yes, Commissioner Eggers.
I think one of the things that again, I'm a term limit person. I've said that since I've been on the commission. I've gotten nowhere with it, but I think it's important that we change perspectives and change ideas. One of the things I like about county government is that there is more of a long-term perspective of people that get in office. You're in there for 4 years. If you're going to get reelected one time, you're talking about an 8-year span. You get a chance to not only learn in the first part, but you start to have a different level of effectiveness as you go into your second or maybe your third term. And when you have that complexity of what you have here, we even talked about it here, about having the budget officer reporting directly to the commission to assist in making their jobs easier. I have an aide. Each of us have an assistant. That's it. I mean, my job is to represent residents in supporting or attacking policies that are recommended. And I have to do that myself. I can't talk to other commissioners. I can't talk to staff because staff is in line with the staff's decision. So it takes time. It takes time to get up to speed to be effective. So I just think from having a little longer term perspective on issues, having a little bit more, having less backup than folks do, perhaps even in Tallahassee or certainly in Washington. I just think it's different, and it should be treated differently. I mean, we're not the only ones that would have 12 years. Some don't have any. Congress, for one. But So I definitely believe in the 12 years for this, but I definitely believe in term limits. I'm glad we're moving in that direction. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Schwartz, were you going to say something? I'm going by
Yeah, I
microphones
would,
here.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd be in support of 12 years. I think for a couple of reasons. First, the 8-year concept, I think, has grown from this 8 is enough that we've heard over a number of years. I don't know if it made any sense, per se. It happened. And people start saying 8 is enough, so 8 sort of became the number. The second thing is, I think the shorter time period, I think you delegate more authority, more power to staff because of just, it takes time, like everybody said, it takes time to understand what's going on. And I think Senator Sigley, even though he mentions 8 years, he probably has an understanding of how much staff runs things in the legislature because there's a lot of new legislators, a consistent turnover of them. And I just think that if we would go with 12, you would actually get the commissioners, I think, having more of the authority and more of the knowledge to make the decisions that would be in the best interest of the community. So that's why I would support 12.
Okay. Commissioner Stack?
Based on what Senator Sigley and Commissioner Eggers had said, I end up taking the opposite view that 12 years, I think, would be more appropriate, along for the same reasons that you're talking about. The reason the federal government has a two-term limit for presidents is the fear that presidents can become more than just presidents. There's no reason for that sort of thing to occur on a county commission. And the benefit of having as much experience as possible, to me, is a plus for the commission.
Okay. Just real quick before I get to Commissioner Twitty. Commissioner Eggers, I had heard you say 12, but did you say 12 or 8? You said 12? Okay, so Commissioner Eggers said 12. Okay. Commissioner Twitty?
I would be in favor of the 12 as well. The institutional knowledge gained by, some of the longer term commissioners and then sharing that knowledge with the ones newer to the commission, I think is very valuable. So I've seen that in action through the years, and I'd hate to lose that.
Okay. Any other comments? Seems like the consensus is 12 year in terms of the draft we're going to review for a final discussion and vote. It sounds like the consensus is for 12 years starting from November 5th of 2024. Unless anybody else wants to speak up, forever hold your peace until the next meeting. Okay. All right. Now let's get to the cooling off period. I'm guessing this one's going to be a little easier now that we got the other two topics done. But the cooling off period, 2 years or 4 years, and that would mean so. And this is, again, not to overly complicate it, but I'm a lawyer, so I do that sometimes. But in Hillsborough County, you have the districts and the at-large, and you can go from a district after 8 years to an at-large after 8 years, which would get you to 16 years. And we discussed that at length in the last meeting, and it didn't sound like there was a whole lot of interest in that, particularly if we're going to recommend 12. It seems like the reason we're recommending 12 is to give them more time to, get into the position and be effective. So the way Mr. Vose has this written, it would be either 2 years sitting out or 4 years sitting out after the conclusion of the 12-year term. So anybody want to start us off on the 4 years versus the 2 years? Senator DeSigley.
4.
4. Commissioner Eggers, 4. Commissioner Oberend, 4. Commissioner Schwartz?
4.
4. Popovich, 4. Okay, so 4. Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Strickland.
When would the candidate appear on the ballot? Does that count as far as when does the 4 years start?
Yeah, so, and Mr. Vose, I'll let you answer that since you're the attorney that's actually the attorney.
Not a problem. So let me make sure I'm understanding your question first. Can you all hear me? Is the mic picking me up, all right? Let me make sure I'm understanding your question here a little bit. Give me exactly what you're asking one more time.
I'm interested in knowing when that 4 years starts and when it ends, depending on how long the person serves, and then you take into account actual days, like the days of the year. I know I got in the weeds today and did math. there are leap years and other things to consider that aren't actual full years?
By the way, yeah, to that point, first off, let me just say generally it's, and I'll direct you to the language of how I structured it in the amendment itself. The provision that would implement the cooling off period reads, such a person may not qualify for or appear on the ballot for the office of commissioner regardless of district with a term beginning less than 4 years after such consecutive years of service have concluded. All right, so we're looking at, in that instance there, we're looking at when terms of office begin and end. And to your point, if you have a concern about it actually goes 363 days or 364 days, I've actually come up with a sentence that was sticking in the back of my head. Come up with a sentence that effectively says reference to 2 years or multiples thereof are reference to 2-year election cycles as opposed to exact dates. I have that language put together, a suggestion I was going to be making at the end.
That's why you're a good attorney. And I only bring it up because it would be a legal challenge down the road, and it would be semantics based on days. Like, absolutely, someone would bring this forward to the county.
Someone could. Yeah, the right fact pattern comes together that could become an issue. And frankly, that is an issue you find in a lot of term limits provisions. There's no case law on it. I know what I would argue if I were defending it. I would say, you know, the reference to 4 years, the reference to 2 years was reference to a 2-year election cycle, and we're not quibbling over days. I think a judge would probably buy that, but there's no reason to have that argument if I can add a sentence that clarifies it.
Yeah, that answers my question. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And would that sentence would be in the ordinance as opposed to, where would that sentence appear?
It would be in the charter language itself. There's no need to have something clarifying like that in the ballot summary.
Got it. Okay. Commissioner Steck, yes, sir.
And just, this is very obvious, but I just want to make sure it's crystal clear. That has nothing to do with campaigning. We're simply talking about the date a term begins and ends versus what persons do prior to that as far as...
That's exactly right. Yeah, everything is in terms of whether or not you're allowed to qualify for or appear on the ballot for a given term that starts at a given date. All right, so someone would be campaigning for that office and qualifying for it 3.5 years, you know, before they would take office if they win. But it's all in reference to those time periods.
Commissioner Eggers, please.
Now, what race are you talking about with just 6 months of running?
Any other comments on term limits before we move on? Okay, and yes, public comment, sure. Mr. Ballard-Geddes, you'd have 3 minutes.
Just quickly in regards to a letter I received from the county when I first... David Ballard-Geddes Jr., live on Georgia Avenue in Palm Harbor. When we first received this reclaimed water charge on our water bill, in with it, I received a letter that said something about a 30-year amortization of such. So let's take the date from this 30-year beginning point to where we are today and add, what are we looking at, 12 years from today on this term limit thing? It coincides somewhat with this 30-year amortization of this reclaimed water issue. How does that coincide with the time frame of all this election cycle, this term limiting out, cooling off period in relation to amortization? Did that make any sense?
Thank you, sir. Is that your comment?
The time frame seems to add up coincidentally. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you for your comment, sir. Okay, any other comments before we move on? No. Okay, we have on the agenda, the last thing we're gonna do is scheduling. And I apologize for having to have this conversation multiple times, but we're gonna get there hopefully tonight. But before we do that, general updates from Mr. Thomas or Mr. Vose.
Right. So As the chair has noted, we've been working our way through the various topics that had sufficient interest from the board or the commission to consider. And so tonight, obviously, was term limits. There are two other pieces that are largely remaining, one of which, and I'll have General Counsel those speak of shortly. I know we're waiting to get some feedback regarding the ballot language and timing for referendum, and so we anticipate probably by the next meeting being able to talk about that. And then we're also talking about at the next meeting, which we'll talk about shortly, which date that will be, but we'll be talking about some initial discussions about the county executive form of government that was discussed this evening. Whether or not we're able to get FCCMA or ICMA or a strong mayor or a county executive member, elected member in at that next meeting or the following meeting, we'll sort that out. But those are the two remaining topics that need to be resolved. And so I'll get moving on getting speakers for those topics, and we'll figure out once we have the conversation about which dates we're going to be meeting on. The other piece that I want to do after Wade speaks on the update on the referendum and the timing of the referendum, we want to talk a little bit about trying to land the plane and when public hearings might potentially be scheduled for as well, and that'll be part of our conversation on the dates. So.
Okay. Mr. Vose?
Thank you, Chairman. I believe I gave a brief update at the last meeting, and I'll tell you just a little bit more now. I've put together language implementing potential revisions to the initiative petition process based on the discussions you had at a previous meeting. I've circulated those revisions to the supervisor's office before finalizing that memo and sharing it out with the CRC, because I wanted to get initial feedback to make sure I wasn't breaking anything. Something would run completely sideways in their office that somehow I missed. So I've been in communication with the supervisor's office. They were having a presidential preference primary just as I was sending it over, so they were a little tied up with that. But I have spoken with them again today, and they are going to have what feedback they have for me back to me very shortly. So I anticipate you will have that memo for your discussion and consideration at your next meeting.
Is that the citizen-led petition process?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, the
I didn't hear that
initiative
part.
petition
Yeah.
process. That's right, yes. In addition, wanted to mention generally, circling back for a moment to the discussion you had at the beginning of the meeting concerning elected county executive. It just happens to be that based on my work in Orange County for their Charter Review Commission, my office had put together materials relating to effectively the strong mayor form of government in county charters in Florida as well as large municipalities in Florida. We have a bunch of that information, just basically raw information in a table breaking down various pieces there, as well as charter provisions from the relevant counties and cities. And I have that that I can slightly rework into a memo to provide to you all. So I was planning on having that as an informational memo to kick off your discussion when you get into that next meeting.
Yes, Mr. Strickland.
Does that also include Miami-Dade information? And
Yes,
how
it does.
It does, okay.
Yeah, it's got, in fact, let me take a look here. It's got relevant charter provisions for Miami-Dade County, Orange County, and Duval County, or Jacksonville, as well as that's on the charter county side. On the large municipality side, because it's at least somewhat analogous for you to be able to take a peek at, City of Miami, City of Tampa, City of Orlando, and City of St. Petersburg. So that information is all assembled together, and it's at least raw information you can peruse at your leisure and see if it informs any discussion you may have.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
the
Mr.
only
Thomas.
other piece you may remember the CRC discussed at the last meeting, Wade provided an overall update on the question of unclassified employees and appointment and removal, and as you may recall, that had been delegated to the county administrator position through an act of the Board of County Commissioners. So we kind of parked that item, not knowing where or the level of interest or what topic might take place, because obviously with the county executive, that would likely have some bearing on appointment and removal authority. So that piece is going to be, depending on where we go in that conversation, would likely come back to you for some further conversation as well.
And that,
I appreciate that. I'll just say it's not working out too well in Miami-Dade, for the record.
Okay.
So you can take that for what it's worth.
Any other comments, Senator Stigley?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Nothing's working very well in Miami-Dade when it comes to things like that.
Okay. Commissioner Steck, yeah.
Your point brings to mind an issue. Is it possible to do some research on the effectiveness of these various forms of government, Duval and Dade and Orange County? Some things may have worked very well, and other things may have been a big mistake.
As quickly as someone could tell me what effective means in a quantifiable way, I mean, folks could give you an opinion on all manner of things.
If for example, if there was a kind of a major public outcry about some aspect of things, or some of the elected officials found this, that, or the other inappropriate or hard to administer, since there's stuff that's in play now, we might as well take advantage of looking at the results of those various things instead of just starting off, perhaps making some mistakes over that they have already done.
One thing I can offer you generally is, with regard to at least most of these jurisdictions, they've been in this form of government for a very long time, oftentimes decades and decades. So I don't know that you'd have really the opportunity to kind of have a double-blind view of seeing before it was this way and now it's changed to this way and everything fell apart, and perhaps because of it. Again, because we're dealing with a very limited sample set here. If anything appears to scream out as being directly related to it, and we come across it as in our travels, we can include that as well. But from a systemic analysis point of view, I'm not sure how to get there.
I guess one question that comes to mind is, has anybody switched back? Has anybody gone to an executive and then switched back to an administrator, or gone, to an administrator and switched back to an executive? That may not be easy to look up, but I'm not aware of any. But
I mean, I'm sure there's a given city somewhere or anything like this throughout the state. But remember, in the grand scheme of things, home rule is not incredibly old. We're dealing just from the late 60s through to now. So there are only so many times you have a big shift in the form of government. One example was, for example, one I'm very familiar with in Orange County, where they shifted from traditional commission form to a county mayor form back in the late 80s. So that is one example of a shift one way, since home rule initiated. But generally, a lot of places, once they get set up one way, you don't have a lot of oscillating back and forth.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Thomas.
Mr. Chairman, I believe that ICMA, International City County Management Association, tracks those movements. So when I do some background on this topic, I'll see if I can pull some data on that about those that have either made conversions to either strong mayor or have converted back to a council manager form. So
Okay,
we'll see if we can track down that information for you.
Thank you. Okay, anything else before we start talking about dates, meeting dates for our final meetings? Okay, I have distilled the dates that Mr. Thomas sent out yesterday to 4 final proposed meeting dates, and I'm going to hopefully see one by one if these work for most of you, hopefully all of you. I don't think Monday, April 15th is good because it's too close to now. How about Monday, April 22nd? Does anyone have major problems with that one? This is what Mr. Thomas sent on Monday, April 1st. Yes, Mr. Thomas.
If need be, I've gotten everybody tallied now, so I can tell you exactly how many people are available on the various dates, if that helps you out.
How's
Mr.
April
Chair.
22nd look?
April 22nd, we've got 4 that can't make it, 1 that can make it by Zoom, and we're waiting on 1 other. So I think we can have a quorum on the 22nd.
That's still not a good turnout.
It's not the best turnout we've got. If you wanted to go to the 28th,
I thought it was the 29th.
or I'm sorry, the 29th, excuse me. 29th is a problem with, we found out there's a problem with Wade's schedule, so the 29th isn't going to be available to us now.
How's May 2nd look?
Yeah, so so if you want to go to the next one, the 22nd is our next best shot, but we've got at least 4 with 1 maybe. on that one. So my sense was that that's probably the best shot, since that's still a discussion point, not a decision-making point, if that works for folks. But that's obviously the desire of the board.
How does May 2nd look?
The second looks good. We only have one individual who cannot make the second.
Why don't we just do the next meeting on May 2nd?
On May
Is everybody
2nd?
okay with that? Okay. How does May 23rd look?
The other one, let me give you a chance. The other option was May 13th. We have one that can't make it, one that can do it by Zoom, and one that's a possible. So
Okay.
that was the reason I've thrown a couple of these out is because if we want to try to land the plane, we also want to talk a little bit about some hearing dates here
Right.
potentially.
All right, so
the
May
third-
2nd and May 13th work?
Both potentially work based on the feedback, as does the 23rd, with the exception of one that can't make it. on
And
the
then how
23rd.
about the 28th?
The 28th is good, with the exception of two, and we are debating of that potentially being the first of the two hearing dates.
How about June 6th?
June 6th is good, but for two people.
Okay.
And Wade and I were just talking this evening about if ultimately we landed on the public hearing on the 28th, you have to have two hearings, and they have to be separated by a certain number of days. One thing we did not propose, but we thought we could talk about tonight, was Monday, June 10th, which was one of the dates that at one point we were considering as a possibility for a CRC meeting.
Okay, can everybody take a quick look at June 10th and let us know availability, please? That works for me. Anybody not able to do June 10th? Mr. Popovich and Mr. Milliken.
And, I'm sorry, Mr. Milliken? Okay. As you know, if we don't do it there, I know you're going to be out for a while, and we can look at some other dates for the second hearing if you did not want to do those. Now, the other option is, in theory, we might, depending on where we land with regards to the concept of the county executive, in theory, we might be able to land on that first public hearing on the 23rd. And Wade, they've got to be what are the parameters again?
23rd, you said?
May 23rd.
5:23. Now, that's assuming that, if there's traction, or we can land the plane sooner than later with regards to the county executive conversation.
My thought is, why don't we go ahead and book May 2nd, May 13th, May 23rd, and June 6th, and see if we can get done in that time frame.
I'm really sorry. Is it May 23rd or May 28th? I wrote
There's
down
two.
the
There's 2 dates. There's the 23rd and the 28th as possible
Okay.
dates.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Brian, could you read
I
those dates
said,
again?
why don't we book May 2nd, May 13th, May 23rd, and June 6th, and then try to have May 23rd and June 6th be the two final. It seemed like those were the ones that most people could attend.
Let me do a little counting here. May.
Going back to when our first conversations, we said that anything to go forward has to be a majority of the 13. So 7, anything that's going to go forward would have to have 7 votes, right?
I believe so.
Yeah. I mean, forward as into referendum.
Yes.
For
Commissioner
clarity,
Lipscomb.
are we saying June 6th and the 10th?
I didn't say 10th yet. I was going to leave that off unless we absolutely had to do it.
Okay.
We know the
If,
time.
I'm so sorry.
That's what Wade's
If we were
checking.
going to make May 23rd and June 6th the hearings, that would satisfy the requirement that they be spaced by at least 10, but not more than 21 days.
Okay?
May 2nd, May 13th, May 23, proposed first hearing, and June 6th, proposed second hearing.
Right.
That's what I think I've heard.
That's what we'll do for now as a placeholder. Yes, Commissioner Pasovich.
So does that put the vote of this commission on the 13th?
It would be, the first vote would be the 23rd, and the second vote would be the 6th.
I understand. Thank you.
No other meetings this month.
No meetings for the rest of April. Commissioner Milliken.
Yeah, I just want to pass on to Doug that I know on the 23rd I said I can't make that meeting, but since Zoom is available, I could potentially do Zoom that night, or
Zoom is
whatever time we do the
available,
meeting, so.
and I highly encourage people to use it so we can get a quorum and you can be heard.
Chairman?
Yes.
Could I ask just very quickly for those commissioners who are present, the date, was it, Doug, April 22nd, that there were 4 unavailable?
Yes.
Okay. I'm hoping against hope, trying to squeeze in one more meeting so you all are not too jammed up and moving forward. Anybody who's unavailable on that date, is that absolute unavailability, or would Zoom work, or?
The 22nd, I can be available via Zoom.
I have Commissioner Brooks, Commissioner Strickland, Commissioner Posevit, and Commissioner Steck as being unavailable. Terry, I have you as by Zoom that date.
And if it's so, it's
So,
so. I just
yeah.
wanted to double check. so.
Commissioner Strickland could do Zoom. I mean, that would be potentially one of the dates we'd hear from one of the experts on the county executive question. So that was an important topic. I just want to make sure as many people were available for that. But I mean, I'm fine scheduling a meeting on the 22nd. I just don't want people to be excluded. So should we go ahead and book the 22nd just to get it moving?
I could
by Zoom?
potentially, I could potentially do Zoom that day.
Okay.
And Rob, potentially.
Likewise.
Okay.
Same.
Okay, let's book the 22nd of April then as the next meeting and move forward so that we can keep this progress. I mean, I think we're making great progress.
My plan, or our plan, Chairman, and I think we probably do the same thing, even having your next meeting on April 22nd, is to bring back for you all, just so you have them in hand in a nice list. Here's everything you all have discussed that has been reduced to ballot language and ballot and charter language that you've looked at and not run away screaming from. So I have it all in a nice little stack. You can look it over and kind of at each of those meetings as we get near the end, reassess and confirm, yes, this is the direction we're going, so that can be integrated into a draft final report.
Okay?
I think that works for us. And I hope to say, I promise I won't bug you with any other dates. I know this has been a challenge.
That's all right.
So thank you for your responsiveness.
No, it's hard coordinating all these schedules.
Chair?
Yes, sir.
So just real quickly, you're going to come back to us at the next meeting, but citizen-led referendums was one, county attorney stuff was one, some administrative cleanup was one, term limits was one, and then we're at this county administrator executive discussion. Are those the 5 that were?
That's my recollection off the top of my head, Commissioner. I'll go back to my notes.
Okay.
There may be some
Yeah, I drafted it all, and I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. That's part of the reason why I wanted to do it, to organize it for everybody, so you can all have a nice little stack in front of you. I can't remember every single one off the top of my
I
head.
just wanted to get my little beady brain around these number of topics that we have, so thank you.
To your point, though, I think we've, as I said, the outstanding item is the referendum, and the outstanding item on, now that we've got clarity on term limits, at least initially, we can start to bring it back in a consolidated document so everybody's clear on where we landed.
Okay. Yes, Nancy. I just was trying not to have a meeting every week because it seems like we end up canceling most of those.
The only reason why I ask, we want to be efficient with the board's calendar, so if it was going to be excluded, I would withhold the tentative hold on it, but if you want to keep it, that's fine.
Yeah, the problem with May 28th is if we do the final hearing June 6th, it's not enough time for the legal notice, right, Wade?
That's right. If it came to be that something slipped and it went to the 28th, and then you had your final meeting on the 10th, it would satisfy. And the 10th was another availability.
I'd say just keep the 28th and the 10th off for now.
Keep the hold on them. Is that what I'm hearing?
Hold or eliminate. I think that's what Nancy's
Might as
asking.
well hold them just in case.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
So just to clarify, what I'm hearing is our next one, April 22nd, May 2nd, May 13th, proposed first public hearing on May 23rd, proposed second public hearing on June 6th, and we're going to hold the 28th just if there's a need for, to regroup in some fashion between the hearings.
And June 10th as a hold.
And hold June 10th as well. Okay, gotcha. All right.
Very good.
Good.
Anything else for the good of the order? We are adjourned. Thank you.